Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Okagaki, Dean of the College of Education and Human Development. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 29th Annual Marion H. Steele Symposium. We've had a wonderful morning of student presentations, and I'm delighted to see the research that our students have been engaged in. I want to thank our faculty members who have encouraged and supported our students throughout the year in their research endeavors, and offer my congratulations to all of the students on their presentations today. The Steele Symposium honors the memory of Marion H. Steele, who graduated from the University of Delaware in 1928. She began her professional career with the American Home Economics Association. In 1946, she became editor of the Journal of Home Economics, which is now the Journal of Family and Consumer Science. She dedicated herself to producing a journal that reflected the strongest research of that time. Mrs. Steele was also actively involved in the lives of students, particularly through the International Scholarship Program. At the time of her retirement in 1969, many students had benefited from her generosity. And we see that generosity extending today. And I would like to thank the family of Marion Steele for their continued support of this symposium. For our keynote address today, we are honored to have Dr. Dale Farran join us. Dr. Farran is a professor in the departments of teaching and learning and psychology and human development in the Peabody College at Vanderbilt University. She is also the senior associate director of the Peabody Research Institute. Professor Farran has been involved in research and intervention for high-risk children and youth for all of her professional career. She has conducted research at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Center in Chapel Hill, and she was also part of the Kamehameha Early Education Project in Hawaii. Dr. Farran is the editor of 2 books dealing with risk and poverty, the author of more than 80 journal articles and book chapters, and a regular presenter at national conferences. Her recent research emphasis is on evaluating the effectiveness of alternative preschool curricula for preparing children from low-income families to transition successfully into school. I've known Dr. Farran for a long time now, and we reconnected when I worked in Washington, D.C. Dale was one of the PIs on a huge evaluation of preschool curricula. I think we had something like 14 different curricula being evaluated. It was an enormous consortium, and most of the people were researchers like Dale, who had been involved in early childhood education for a long time. The evaluation consisted of several randomized trials in which common outcome measures were used. Everyone went into the evaluation fully expecting that we would find that many of these research-based curricula would yield positive effects on young children's development relative to business as usual practice in early childhood programs. Well, long story short, we found some positive effects for the early math curricula, but not so much for the others. And as the results kept coming in, researcher after researcher was not finding a positive effect versus business as usual. And I would hear people trying to essentially explain away the results. But there came a day when I heard Dale say, maybe our curriculum isn't working. Maybe it's not the key. I have to rethink what I've been doing for my entire career. And in that moment, I saw a researcher who was willing to grapple with the data even when it went against her hypotheses. To me, this is one of the marks of a true scientist. A scientist has to be willing to let the data speak, even when it's not the answer that she wants. Dale, I'm delighted to welcome you to the University of Delaware. We are honored to have you here today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dale Farran.
Okay. I might have to, they wanted to know if I was going to move around. Well, I might have to move around if I see anybody in the back there begin to put their heads down. So, or even in the front. So anyway, no heads down. So Lynn invited me to do this some time ago, and she told me what this was about, and I had a whole presentation planned for you, which was terribly provocative. And then at the last minute, I've decided I'm not doing that, because that just, you might not be my friends after that. So, I'm going to really talk to you more about sort of my journey that's similar to what Lynn talked about in terms of how it began. One of the things that I have found is that there is really nothing so humbling as actually testing out your ideas. And then you have to punt. You have to back up and say, what was wrong? Is it, and often I find, so you'll hear me say, that people will say, well, what must have been wrong was the way it was implemented. My idea is still great, it was the way it was implemented. Or I heard one of the PSER people say, the control group was just too good. And I thought, okay, well, if the control group was good without being trained, anyway, so, but to back up and say, maybe I need to think this out again, sort of like Oliver, and I need to go back through this and really, and it's odd to do that in what is, granted, the last part of my career. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm not in the middle of my career. So anyway, so I want to talk to you about how this journey and how I got there, and try not to take too long about it so that we can have some time to talk. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Thank you. So I don't have a typical career. And for all of you who are so worried, now what am I going to do next? And do I get a faculty position? Well, maybe it is that way now that things are bad, but I didn't come up that way. So I actually started out in an experimental school for underachievers in North Carolina that was then moved to Philadelphia, and lived in Philadelphia in the late 60s and 70s. A great time to be there. But then in the 70s, I went down to Frank Porter Graham, and so I got my PhD at Bryn Mawr. And then I did a postdoc at the Frank Porter Graham Center and left middle schoolers for good reason. And so started getting interested in issues about early intervention and poverty. But also that was a research institute, so I paid for myself and lots of staff members for 10 years from soft money. That'll really hone your writing skills. And then in the 80s, I went to Hawaii, and you said Kamehameha perfectly. It was just wonderful. And interacted with anthropologists, and suddenly the way I was thinking about the world and the way I was thinking about children began to really be reshaped, because there was a whole different perspective out there to take into account. Came back to Greensboro, North Carolina, and chaired a Human Development Family Studies department. They had no idea what I didn't know. Came in first full-time. Many of you are going to put your heads down and say, this is terrible. What a terrible dean she had to make such a mistake. They hired me in my first full-time faculty position as a tenured full professor, chair of the department. I didn't sleep for 2 years. I had no idea all the things I had to learn. Oh, my Lord. So anyway, but I got really interested in issues about teachers supporting. It was a state university, UNC Greensboro. There was a lot of work with the state. Chaired a committee to develop a new teaching license in early childhood. Did a lot of things that really involved working with teachers and school systems and the state. It was great. But then I came to Vanderbilt. So a whole different perspective. So Vanderbilt leapfrogs right past the state and into national prominence. And teamed up with Mark Lipsey for the PSER project and haven't looked back. So in 2008, my dean put some seed money behind what's now called the Peabody Research Institute And Mark and I started it, and within a year we had gotten $10.5 million worth of grants going and haven't stopped since. And we partner with other faculty members to help with methodology, but we also do our own research. But the themes have been the same for all that, which is, you look back after 40 years and you think we really haven't done, all this work, and we haven't really improved the life chances of children born in poverty in this country. Not very much. But I still want to. And totally committed to using research to try to figure out what works. Sort of have a visceral reaction to ideological arguments. So these are the kinds of curriculum evaluations. Now, when I started in early childhood, and some of you may remember this, I had a state person walk out of the room with me when I used the word curriculum. You didn't use the word curriculum in early childhood together. Because that's not, you didn't do curriculum in early childhood. Those of you who are young are looking really puzzled, like, how can that be? Well, it was be, I'll tell you. But since 2000, there's been a ton of work and concern about, and lots of sales, market-driven, to sell school systems on curriculum. All of which are, quote, evidence-based, which means that they read some research. So we got started with PISA, which I understood as soon as that RFA came out. This is a new day. And then we did an early reading first evaluation. We brought $4.5 million into this tiny, rural, large geographically, very small population in Tennessee and all. I thought, we could just divide this money up and send it to the parents and say, get literate. But we didn't do that. So then we were involved in a scale-up early math project, been involved in the evaluation of the tools of the mind. So these are all different arguments, alternative foci for what will make a difference long-term for children. So is it literacy? Is it math? Is it self-regulation? We've actually looked at all of them. And got so interested in self-regulation and how difficult it was to measure that we actually had a self-regulation measurement study Mark and I did to try to get a reliable set of measures on that. Most recently, we are known, and some of you may not know this, so you'll learn today, we've done a statewide evaluation of the Tennessee voluntary pre-K program, and now we've gotten follow-up funding to take them through 8th grade. This is a waiting list randomized design, like the Head Start implementation study, or impact study, and we've had money to follow them through 3rd grade. Now we're going to go through 8th grade, but I will talk about that no more. But I just wanted to, I'm not going to talk about, lucky, don't think you are in for it. I'm not going to talk about each of these studies in detail, but I do want to talk to you about lessons learned from them. But what you'll see is this kind of work, these are all large N studies, right? So these are, they have a lot of kids involved. And the danger, of course, of large N studies is that all you know at the end is yes or no. But we've tried to couple all of our large N studies with very intensive evaluations of what's actually going on to help us, if possible, to find out why it works or why it didn't work, to know more about what's happening than just yes or no, because I don't think that's very useful. But, so, I was going to talk about this, but I don't think I'll talk about that. But I just want to make the point that as I look back over the last years of my life, I really think a lot about whether the research we've done is consequential. So what have we done? And the research that we're doing now, when we think about it, I had a doctoral student in my office just before I left here who had just finished a paper and very likely going to get it published. And he said he looked back through it and he thought, I'm going to get this published, but this doesn't have any consequence. This is not consequential. It's well done. It's an ethnographic study. It had to do with identity development in African Americans. But she said, but I don't think this is going to take anybody anywhere. This is not going to do anything. So, and I thought, well, to know that already is actually useful, because then you will hopefully spend your career trying to think, what are the consequences of what I'm doing? It's not just to get a publication, right? it is to make a difference somewhere. And it doesn't have to, and it doesn't have to be a big national difference. It has to make a difference somewhere. So I'm going to talk to you about these issues that are central to my research. Everybody still with me? Okay. All right, good. So the first question, which the PISA thing addressed, was, will early experiences with different curricular approaches lead to different outcomes for children? Okay? So you have a lot of people out there selling. You have a lot of school systems buying. And the question is, does it matter which one you choose? You know? So most school systems, most school districts, most states now list acceptable alternative curricula. They're wild lists if you've ever looked at them, because they connote an incredibly different vision of the world depending on which one you chose, but they're out there. And so does it make a difference which one you choose? Okay, I have to watch my time. All right. So in PISA, we started out with this way. So in PISA, excuse me, both of these curricula that we chose were full day. They were available to school systems. They were implemented in the usual way, in that school systems adopt a curriculum. They give modest amounts of training. Sometimes they don't give any, but they give training. And then teachers are expected to implement them, right? And every time we have a new school superintendent, then you have a whole, changeover. But these ones that we chose actually presented alternate points of view on what children need to know. One of them was a literacy focus, Bright Beginnings, which is morphed into a new curriculum, a different name called Opening Worlds of Learning, OWL. The other one was a developmental focus, Creative Curriculum, put out by Teaching Strategies. At the end of kindergarten, that's why the PISA program actually stopped collecting any further data. We saw no effects for either curriculum compared to business as usual. Children learned in these classrooms. They learned equivalently whether they had the literacy curriculum, developmental curriculum, or the business as usual. And business as usual, if I can take a little digression, was really business as usual. I interviewed teachers. I take a lot of the data myself in classrooms. And I said, this is a control classroom teacher, do you have themes? Oh, yes, I have themes. Oh, what's your theme? This is February, I was interviewing. What's your theme for this month? Well, February, is Dental Health Month. I said, well, I actually had forgotten that, but okay. So we do teeth, and she said, and then of course it's Valentine's Day, right? So we do Friends. I said, and then she said, it's President's Day in February, so we do Presidents, and that was 3 weeks. And she said, and then I do Penguins. I said, penguins? Why penguins? She said, I like penguins. And I was thinking, being a child in that room, and I'm going from teeth to Friends to Presidents to Penguins, it's kind of like, woo, it's just a carousel. So, but unlike the rest of the PISA projects, we actually have data on these kids through 7th grade, on their standardized tests, on their standardized state tests. And the state has worked with us to pull these test data down by curriculum condition. Interested? We get long-term effects. We get them through 7th grade, and they look just like they looked at 3rd grade. Here are the 3rd grade data. So if you had the literacy, this is reading and this is math. So if you had the literacy curriculum, there's a significant effect on reading in 3rd grade. There's also a significant effect compared to the control group for creative curriculum. There's a significant effect for math for both of them. They're not different from each other. And then they're both different from the control group. So one of the conclusions that you might, I think I did draw that, yes. One of the conclusions is that having a defined curriculum, no matter what it is, that helps organize and not go to President's, Penguins, and Teeth all in the same, that helps organize and give some sort of consistency and coherence to what the teacher's doing over the year might pay off in the long run in some way that helps children be sort of more organized as they go. Because we really do see those same effects all the way through 7th grade. So, but the other thing is that we were really interested in the skills that the children had when they came into kindergarten from their pre-K experience, and they were what relates to what long term. And it turns out that, just like Duncan found, the early math skills are as important or maybe more important than the early literacy skills. That math skills predict language and math, and language skills or literacy skills only predict literacy, but not math. And so, but some also, which you're going to see how this all ties together. We found that teacher ratings of language comprehension and self-regulation, a little 4-item rating that the teachers did, were independently related to TCAP scores 5 years later. And that is when we controlled for early math and early literacy skills. So something about the way children were behaving and adapting to a classroom learning environment, which is the first time they've encountered a learning environment like that, but it's one for kids they're going to see from the next 13 years. The way they adapt to that kind of structure and the way teachers see them adapting to that kind of structure was predictive of the way they were going to test and obviously learn from that structure over the next 4 or 5 years until they took their TCAP scores. So, second issue. All right, you can put numbers up if you want me to stop. So which skills at kindergarten are most strongly linked to performance? I was talking about that. And so, so we began then exploring different curricular approaches. So now we found that self-regulation is important, that math's important. So I'm not going to talk about it, but we got into the math scale up with Doug Clements because we wanted to investigate further this idea that math skills, if you could manipulate math skills and help kids get better in math, then you should be able to presumably improve their skills later on. But the other candidate was self-regulation. So that was getting a lot of buzz. So we had this little teacher ratings that showed self-regulation seemed to be important, and showed up suddenly a curriculum that said it improved self-regulation. I thought, well, we ought to get involved in that. Be careful what you wish for. So I don't know how many of you know the Tools of the Mind curriculum. 2 people, 3 people. Currently being used in Washington, D.C. So it was supposed to be focused on helping children develop learning dispositions while they are learning academic skills. So, can you see? I'm sorry, am I standing in your way? Self-regulation, attentiveness, behavioral control, and sensibly, this is like the humbling part, sensibly, those kinds of dispositions should help children learn when they go further in school. And plus, the New York Times really loved it, and the Wall Street Journal and National Public Radio featured it, and it was just all over the place. It was, Baskin Robbins should be so lucky. So, what did we find? We followed 80 classrooms of kids across 5 school systems through first grade. Whoops. No effects. No effects on literacy, no effects on language, no effects on mathematics gains when compared to comparison kids. None. I mean, you've never seen means more similar. At the end of kindergarten, we began to see some difference in favor of the control group. But there were also no significant effects on self-regulation gains in a direct assessment, and also it's moving itself. And also on teacher ratings of self-regulation, no effect. And it was not more or less effective for any of the subgroups. So it wasn't more or less effective for boys or gender, or ethnicity or ELL. So it just wasn't any more effective, period. Now the developers don't talk to us. So I'm humbled, they're mad. So again, what we've not finding is that these improvements that children are making in skills, it's a mixed message. We don't find that when you directly use a curriculum, we don't find a lot of things directly that are differentiated by that curriculum. It looks like having a curriculum is better than sort of making it up on the fly, but the particular focus of that curriculum does not seem to be linked to the particular outcomes, which is kind of surprising. And so our question was, well, what might be linked? So I have a fairly extensive system that I'm not recommending to anybody, a fairly extensive system for observing in classrooms. And I do a lot of these observations. I take a lot of these data. And one of them is a narrative record which looks at what's going on, how is time spent in the entire classroom. We actually developed this for kindergarten and first grade assessments. But it's basically how do they allocate time? A lot of it is transitions, but aside from that, and how do they allocate it among content areas? And does that make any difference? And the other one is what we call the teacher observation, the top teacher observation, and we have child observation. And these are behavioral records that are very specific. So I look at Sue, and I figure out what she's doing. Thank heaven she's smiling. And then I write that down. And then I go to Roberta, who's not smiling. Oh, and then I write that down. And so I go around and I get the teacher and the assistant. So across the day, I can get 20 sweeps in of a classroom of 20 with two teachers, a teacher and assistant. And we can have a pretty good picture of what's going on in that classroom. And we do it 3 times a year. So what this has enabled us to do is, if the curriculum's not making a difference, are there some behaviors that we can look at that are linked to gains? Because there are differential gains in classrooms. Classrooms are not making similar effects on children, right? There are differences among them. So what are those linked to? Can we figure it out in terms of how time is spent, what teachers are doing, the relationship between the teachers and the child, the way children are performing? Can we figure that out? And if we could, then the possibility is that may be a source of thinking about creating future curricula, or it might be a source for thinking about professional development for teachers and so forth. So, so you want to know whether that's true. Yes, it's true. Yes, and we've got a couple of papers coming out about this. One's already out in the School Psychology Quarterly, but that's the one that's going to be over there. This is the one that's coming out, that's just being sent in now. These are not going to be rocket science, all right? We're in classrooms, in these pre-kindergarten classrooms, where the negativity by the teacher is astounding. It's astounding. So across these 80 classrooms, the rate, I mean, this is 20 times we see this teacher, and the rate at which they are admonishing children and telling them that their behavior is not what's expected is astoundingly high. We are in some classrooms with equivalent children where we didn't see a teacher or an assistant use one behavior disapproving comment the entire 3 times we were there. So it isn't a matter of just what kids you have. It's a matter of knowing how to operate a classroom of children and do it effectively. So less behavior disapproving, more positive teacher affect. Do you know how serious teaching is? I go into elementary schools, I don't see anybody smile. Nobody smile. We're in elementary schools following up children, and I'm standing in the doorway waiting to take a child out to do an assessment. And she looks at me and she says, "You're so pretty." And I want to say, "No, baby, I'm smiling." That's, that's the difference. You know, I mean, I think it's worse now. I think teachers' morale is very bad, but I think people forget to take joy. So more time in the classroom. I was telling Roberta that, you know, suddenly with this pre-K moving into public schools, we have children going out for specials. They do their art and their music in another room with a different teacher. It's ridiculous. So more time in language arts, but higher teacher instruction level. Most of the teacher instruction that we see is so low level. Higher engagement levels overall. Okay, how about self-regulation gains? Guess what? More behavior approving by the teacher. Some of these things are consistent. Less behavior reminders by the teacher. More teacher instruction. More time in actual things that are interesting. Higher, again, the higher instruction level, higher engagement levels, more. So there are these characteristics. When we look across the studies we've done in all classrooms where we've collected these kinds of data, we're beginning to pull them all together to say, you know, there are things we know about how to create a higher quality classroom that might actually produce what you want, but curriculum's not it, because we didn't find any difference in any of our curriculum conditions on these behaviors. Teachers who had tools of the mind did not do these things any more than teachers who didn't have it. So the curriculum itself is not affecting these things. Okay. So, all right. So, fourth issue. This is, all right. Can pre-kindergarten programs be scaled up? This is all the news. Tell you, we want to be current. To achieve the same effects. So, we started this 7 years ago, developing a very strong partnership with our State Department of Education. Took a year or two, and developed a proposal to evaluate, well, first, before I do that, let me tell you about this, what's going on. Because I think we have to keep track of what the problem is, right? Rather than just what the solution is. We have to keep track of what the problem is. The problem is clear. We have a widening achievement gap in this country. And it's related to income. And if you haven't looked at Sean Reardon's graphs on this, I advise you to go look at them because they're very clear. The racial gap has been replaced by actually an income gap, and that's widening. And it widens across the school years. So we have to worry about this. I can't worry about the entire gap, but I can worry about, what's happening for young children. And the solution being proposed for this is universal pre-K, early childhood education. Nobel laureates, Heckman, who did not get his Nobel in early childhood, but nonetheless, is in all over the Times, all over any place you can open, there's a Heckman article that says this is what we should be doing. So Mayor Bill de Blasio is going to provide universal pre-kindergarten to every 4-year-old. There's an Oklahoma model that has this, so forth. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. We're taking over. But this is not an evidence-based commitment. This is a belief. And the evidence that people cite for the effects of universal pre-K come from 2 studies from the 60s and 70s, one of which I was involved with for 10 years. So the Peabody Preschool and the Abecedarian Project. Those are the studies that Heckman both cites and then reanalyzes the data from. The last thing he just put in Science, there were 9 children left in one of the cell groups. I think the control boys had 9 kids left in them. I don't even know how you run statistics on 9 kids, but you can still get in Science. So the truth is, these studies are neither representative of what's going on today, nor are they scalable. And Greg Duncan was kind enough to lend me this. So if you look at, okay, I haven't shown that many data charts. So if you look at Peabody Preschool and the Abecedarian Project, so here's what Greg did. He looked at the effect sizes, and if effect sizes are just think of these as standard deviation units. So if Peabody Preschool is a little over 1, it means that the experimental group is 1 standard deviation higher than the control group. Abecedarian wasn't quite that much. It was close, though. It was about 0.8. So that's a pretty hefty effect. Those are the 2 that are cited all the time as why we should be doing universal pre-K, and particularly, we're going to keep people from going to jail, and we're going to, they're all going to get good jobs and all that from these 2. And there were 112 kids in the Abecedarian Project and 56 in the Peabody Preschool. Okay. One of them was in Chapel Hill, and one of them was in Ypsilanti. Okay. So, Greg charted, now this is just, all this is end of treatment. This is just at the end of pre-K, going into kindergarten, what the effect sizes were. And you'll see that these clearly were outliers. I'm sorry, you can't. No, I'm being sensitive. Okay. So what you see is these really were outliers. In terms of effect sizes, you really do have much more down here at the 0.3, 0.2 sort of range. So when we think about what's going on with whether we're scaling up pre-K, we need to be thinking about is this difference something that could actually be useful today, or is it unreplicatable because of the time and because of the funding for it? I mean, the Abecedarian project actually started when kids were 6 weeks of age, and they were there 12 months a year, and they were there all day long, and the infants were on the floor with 2 pediatricians, and a nurse. Okay. So thinking about this, we got funded. The only randomized control trial scaled up program that's similar to what's being proposed. It's a waitlist control group, which means I could do hours on working with school systems to have them develop waitlist controls. But it's similar to the Head Start Impact Study. And unlike the majority of what you see data being cited, if it's not Abecedarian or Perry, these are not RDDs. RDD approaches can only, regression discontinuity design, can only look at how kids differ when they go into kindergarten. It can't track them after that because they all get pre-K. So the Tennessee Voluntary Pre-K program is really a model for how this universal pre-K would look, right? It's for 4-year-olds. It prioritizes kids who are from free and reduced lunch. It is a full day program, meaning not what parents who work think is full day, but it's what a school system thinks. It's 5.5 hours a day, 180 days a year. And it was careful to try to meet all of the near National Institute, Jason, Education.
Early education research.
That's it. People just say near and they forget, it's like, anyway. So we had licensed teachers in early childhood in every classroom. We had an aide in every classroom, maximum class size of 20. There was this list of curriculum that you could choose and that teachers were supposed to implement. The only thing we didn't meet was that the assistant didn't have a CDA. That's the one thing that we're on. So if states are looking for what are the criteria for, what are the criteria for running these programs, then these are it, right? So there are now 934 of these classrooms. So here's what we found. We get positive effects at the end of pre-K on all measures, just like the RDD approaches do, And when we did, we were heroes. The effects were not sustained and were gone by the end of kindergarten, and by the end of first grade, there was actually a significant effect on math for the control group. And where were these control groups? 60% of them were home. Okay? Non-cognitive outcomes, which is, Heckman's big term, non-cognitive outcomes. That's what we need, because that's what happens, these kids all finish school and they do this. Well, so in the beginning of kindergarten, we had teacher ratings, and teachers did rate these kids coming into classrooms in kindergarten as being more prepared, as having better work-related skills, as having fewer problems, as whatever. They saw this rated in the first couple of weeks, 6 weeks of school. By the end of first grade, the teachers saw no difference in the kids. They did not see any differences any longer in the kids' behaviors in the classroom. School records. So we had fewer of our participants retained in kindergarten, quite likely because teachers saw them as being less prepared and because they really were less prepared for kindergarten. But by the end of first grade, there is no difference any longer in the retention rates of the two. Our kids still, though, attended I think it's 2.5 more days on average in class. Across the year than the other kids. So this was a little surprising. Oh, it was extremely surprising to our partners in the DOE. But if you look at it, our results are very much in line with what Greg showed. That when you scale up these programs, when you have various programs, they're not going to get these kinds of effects. So what was the reaction to this? Well, first of all, Russ Whitehurst has been excoriated for urging to Congress some caution in how quickly we scale out this program and expand it. And he cited us as evidence for why they should do that. So we're having a little backlash. And what happens is that now the troops rally, and there's a lot of support for pre-K on the basis of anecdote. So you have people, pre-K specialists, who says, not only do the kids have a better idea of the academic skills they need, but they have the routine of school down. So that seems to me that's changing the focus of what pre-K was supposed to be about. Another pre-K director said, you have to look at the large picture, you have to look at the whole child, not just their achievement scores. Okay, but I'm not sure what that means exactly. These results came out in August, and I was in Washington, D.C., and unnamed analyst for the Obama administration wanted to meet with me, so we met. And we went over these results in some detail. And when we finished, it was like 35, you know? So she leans over to me, and she really puts out her hand, and she says, I don't want to hurt your feelings. We will not be referencing your study. I said, well, you're not hurting my feelings, but I thought this was like an evidence-based administration. And she said, yeah, but we're already down this path. We're already down this road. So this is my concern, is in all of our research, whenever we start getting more committed to the solution than we are to solving the problem, we've got a problem. We need to think about what the problem was we were trying to address with our solution in the first place, and then figure out whether the solution we thought was going to work worked, and if it didn't, what's another solution? What's a different solution? But not lose track of the problem because you're so wedded to the solution that you've identified. So what we've learned is if you're really going to scale up pre-K, there's no coherent vision about what a 4-year-old needs to know in order to not have that achievement gap when they get to be in middle school. And so there's no way to tell pre-K what role it should play or what it should be doing because we don't have the vision. All of the pre-K evaluations, including ours, find differences in the kinds of domains affected. The ones affected are the low-hanging fruit. You know, there are only 26 letters in the alphabet, and they get that, you know, and the control kids get it in about 2 weeks when they get to kindergarten. So, but they're not affecting language skills, they're not affecting math skills. The things that really relate long-term to how you do in school are not being affected by these programs. And you just have to conclude that programs that have a minimum cost, which is what people are trying to do, minimum required program elements, scale up easily, but likely have no important or long-term effects. So it's not easy to, the idea that this universal pre-K can be just done by giving states money is kind of nuts. And if we don't have a strong vision with some power behind it, you're not going to get school systems to go along because they're dadgum independent, you know? They just do kind of what they want to do unless there's really some overwhelming agreed upon vision about this is what should be happening that is linked to how principals look at teachers in their classrooms, make judgment about what's going on. You got to get the whole 9 yards in order to have this vision be implemented. But even if we could figure out an effective program, I think it's going to be a real challenge to scale this up. I mean, we scaled up kindergarten, and we took a fair number of years to do that, and look what's happened to it now. So this is it. So the work that we started in 2002, thank you, Lynn, has led to all these subsequent investigations. But at the heart of this has been a commitment to try to learn more about what helps children learn in school. And we really tried hard not to be committed to any particular solutions, but to investigate the solutions that people propose. That makes us a little bit of a voyeur, sort of. I mean, we're not sort of taking a stand and developing a curriculum ourselves, which some people do. But I think you also need people like us who say, oh, that's a good idea. Let's figure out if it works. Then talk to us afterward. So these projects may tell us more about effective classroom things altogether. So if you look at this is our study that we began, Mark, and that's how I first started working with Mark Lipsey. Thank the Lord. And so we looked at curriculum fidelity and classroom processes, math skills, self-regulation, all grew out of that long-term effects. And we looked at various curricula and measurement, and now very interested in the whole self-regulation and math skills and how that goes together. And suddenly I'm back in middle grades. I feel like I've come full circle. So we're doing this, we're looking at middle grades transitions both for our Tennessee VPK kids, because if Heckman's right and a miracle occurs, we want to be there to know what that miracle is, you know? And then we're also looking at long-term follow-up from this pre-K math intervention for low-income urban kids, some of whom don't even have a good sense of the number line, and they're in 5th grade. And so we want to try to link, if we can, information about their 5th grade back to what they should have gotten in K1 and 2 to help improve practices there. But that's what we're about. I can't retire. Thank you. Okay, Roberta.
So if they gave you the money, if they made you in charge of instituting universal pre-K in the United States, what would you do?
Well, I wouldn't do it. I don't think we're ready to do universal pre-K. Well, one of the ways you could do it is...
down that road.
Yeah, exactly. I think that we, part of what I was going to talk about and changed my mind is I think we need to lend our research skills to local efforts. And so one of the things, one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm working very closely with the Nashville school system. They're scaling up pre-K, doesn't matter, the evidence be damned. So they're scaling up pre-K and making these pre-K hubs. And so if I can get in now and change what they are doing, or get their teachers to be on sort of the ground up, get their teachers to be interested in information back about how their classrooms are operating, and changing things and working together to make a better system. I'd love to use that as a model. I think we need to get closer to what's going on and helping people do better things. And we don't know enough a lot about how to make that happen yet, you know? So I'd like to get in there and see if we can find out how to make it happen. That's what I'd do.
So another problem is that we pay people the most the higher up you go in the educational system. Maybe we should reverse the scale.
Yeah.
And because seriously, the teachers who are pre-K teachers, there may be something about having different kinds of people in those classrooms that will help reduce the negativity, help increase the joy, help increase on-target discussions with kids.
Well, yeah, I have to. And now you know me now. We're all friends here, and so I can say, you know, I say what I just say things. So, in Head Start classrooms, the negativity was 3 times as much. So, the Tennessee VPK programs and the other ones, they're all licensed early childhood teachers. They're all paid at the same rate as regular teachers. So I know that differs by state, but in Tennessee, they're all paid the same as any other teacher and paid on the basis of experience. So I don't think that's enough. I don't think it's enough. Yes?
So you spoke a little bit about the different teacher dispositions that you noticed and sort of the outcomes that that had for students. I'm wondering if you looked at any other teacher data in terms of teachers' levels of experience and maybe if that has any influence on those outcomes.
We've looked at that. We've looked at, you know, because although they all have bachelor's degrees, of course, and they're all licensed, but some of them have masters and some of them have 30 plus, and so we've looked at education. We've looked at years of experience. In Tools of the Mind, the teachers had average level of pre-K experience of 7 years, and so we haven't found anything. We don't find anything related to those, and part of it is you can do this. We wanted to sort of dig deeper and say, not only do they have this license, where did they get it? I don't know that we've done it. Okay, so I'm in the School of Education. So here's the thing. I might as well offend everybody. So here's the thing. When we send teachers out, I mean, I think it's similar to architects. If we graduated a whole bunch of architects and they went out and their buildings fell down, we would either say, either we're not training them in the right way, or they're not being allowed to practice to do what they know. But we better find out which way it is. And I don't think we know enough about the link between how we're training teachers. So if we want to rely on having better trained teachers to be in those classrooms, we need to know more about how we're training them and then follow them up to see if that actually is working. And if it's not working, then why isn't it working? Is it something about the situation they're in, or is it something about the fact that we didn't give them some of the skills that they need to do well there? But I think we've got to make that link between a better link, closer link between preparation and practice.
Let me try this argument.
Good.
You would say kindergarten was probably a good idea when that got introduced, right?
I thought so. I went to kindergarten in Georgia when I was.
So, look what it did for me, right? So,
Exactly.
So kindergarten was a good thing. And so what's happening with this pre-K is you have a political will to actually buy another year of school, which is unusual.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right.
So, now what's happening with kindergarten, which I think you alluded to, is it has become really first grade. Because the Common Core stuff, rigor masquerades as just shoving everything down a year. So kindergarten's going to go away because it's being pushed down. So then I would grab this pre-K and say, let's make that what kindergarten used to be. I mean, there is a curriculum there. There is a vision of what it is. There's half a century of thinking about kindergarten, and we're going to lose it.
They are.
Under a lot of things going on now. So in a way, it leads me to say, to answer Roberta's question, like take the money and run. Take the money, and there's an opportunity to build pre-K, and it's going to end up looking a lot like the old K. How's that go?
I think it's a great idea, but I think we got to have people there with the vision to help do it. I mean, it's they're not going to do it if they just get the money. Because we see on average, kids in Tennessee VPK are in whole group instruction an hour and 40 minutes a day. They are in center time, where the kids get to choose, about 30 minutes. So it's already happening that it's being hijacked.
I got it.
Right.
So I find the idea that policymakers, well, I don't find it surprising, but the idea that policymakers are selectively using evidence to support their policy positions, I find that very concerning. And I wonder what your thoughts are about how we make it so that the rigorous evidence that's available is used more frequently and more broadly, and when it's not used, that we make it impossible to ignore the evidence.
Henry, right? We had dinner together years ago. Okay, I remember. It's a great question. I think part of the onus comes right to us. We frequently shape our reporting of data in ways that suit the ideology we already have. I'm sorry, but we do. And we find people who are going to listen to us, and we pitch it that way. And if we're scientists, we really need to have this kind of, I got to be open to what's really possible and what the data are really showing me. And people don't, it's really hard for us to give up our solutions that we've already decided on, or our point of view that we think we know what's going on. But we got to start with us. We got to start with the academy of being better. When the Head Start Impact Study came out, I was shocked at my colleagues who immediately rushed around to say, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true, and I thought, well, wait a minute, suppose it is true, what do we do now? We're likely to do something to try to improve the situation if we actually look at what it really is showing us, than if we pretend that it's not. So I think that's where we have to start. I don't know that we can stop politicians from cherry picking what they want to hear.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
There was somebody over here.
At the societal level, but also in terms of research, are we focusing too much on what occurs during 5 hours of the day and not what occurs during the 19 hours of the day?
Okay. So in a prior life, I did studies of mother-child interaction. And I gave it up. because I really became convinced that parenting derives from context. And I didn't have a lot of power to control the context in which a lot of these parents live. What I could control, I thought I could control, I'm wrong, but I thought I could control more what happens to them when they get to school. I mean, that's an environment in which you could exert some control. And I think we've got to believe that we can make a difference in that school environment. We've just got to believe that. Granted, for some kids, we have a lot of difficult things to try to work around and against that are coming to them from their neighborhoods and their communities and families and whatever. But I think we've got to work on making our schools better places. If we really made them better places, then, and it still wasn't working, then I think we need to broaden our lens and go further. But so.
But it just seems, I mean, what some of your data might be showing, it's like some programs do have positive effects, but something undermines those effects. And it's not necessarily the school. So if you do have children from poverty, which once you are,
Right.
and then they make the gains, and the gains don't continue, you need to start asking the question, what explains that? And it might be factors other than what's occurring only during those 5 hours. And it just seems like, as Cora said, in terms of resources, should we be allocating more resources at research that would be explaining some of the factors, not only in the school, but also outside the school, and whether or not there are interventions and programs that actually deal with that. I mean, I'm thinking also, I do some research on behavior problems, and much of the research on behavior problems show that some of the most effective interventions are parent management training. Okay, in fact, I mean, I would say almost some of the hardcore kids with the greatest behavior problems, if you don't really do parent management training, you know, that meds is about it. So it seems like some of that may also apply, that logic would apply to the research here, that there's limits to how much a school can do as far as long-term predictions of behavior, but also, let's say, with achievement, if you're not impacting some of the other variables that occur during 19 hours of the day, not just the 5 hours in preschool.
Well, undoubtedly, the child is being affected by, the 24 hours he or she is spending various places. I think it's very complicated in terms of what the relationship is between schools, families, and communities. And I think we have not effectively kept our K-12 system rooted in a community and responsive to a community and actually interacting with community members. For difficult behavior problems, clearly that's a different sort of intervention. But that's actually a fairly small percentage of the kids who are really having this achievement gap long term. That's happening to lots of kids, some of whom are, not serious behavior problems. And so I think what I'm choosing to work on is I just would really like to make those schools better places for kids. And I know they're not good enough right now for a lot of the kids. And so I just want to work on that first. And I think the other is a more complicated problem. And I probably don't have enough energy left to expand beyond that. So thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for attending. If this was the less provocative part, I'm sorry we missed the other one. Anyway, I want to again congratulate all of our students who presented. I know that those of you that I spoke with during your poster presentations and the paper presentations that I listened to were just really thoughtful work, and I want to congratulate you and your advisors. We look forward to seeing you in, and I'm just going to say, is it 2 hours when the celebrations of excellence start? So thank you all. And Dale will be here for a few more minutes if anyone wants to come and speak with us.
I'd be happy to. Okay.